Think about the last time you got a tax refund. Maybe it was a few $100s. Maybe it was a few thousand. Now think about what you did with it. Did you treat it like a normal paycheck? Pay a bill, top up your savings, put it towards something responsible? Or did you do what most people do? Book a trip you'd been putting off. Buy something you'd told yourself you couldn't afford. Spend it faster and looser than you'd ever spend money you earned in a regular week. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A tax refund is not a windfall. It is not a gift. It is not found money. It is your salary, money you already earned, that the government withheld too much of and is now returning to you. You worked for every dollar of it, in January, in February, in March. But it doesn't feel that way. And because it doesn't feel that way, most people spend it completely differently than they spend their regular income. More impulsively, more indulgently, with less guilt and less planning. That gap between what money is and what money feels like is what this entire video is about. It's called mental accounting. It is the hidden system your brain runs every time you touch money. And once you understand it, you will see it operating in every financial decision you make. From the deal that made you buy something you didn't need, to the investment you've held for years even though you know it's a loser. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how that system works. And more importantly, you'll know when it's quietly costing you thousands. Standard economics is built on a simple, elegant idea. Money is money. A dollar in your savings account is worth exactly the same as a dollar in your wallet. A bonus should feel no different from regular income. A windfall should be treated with the same care as money you earned through years of steady work. In the economist's ideal world, people treat all money as fungible, interchangeable, label-free, always worth exactly what it is worth, regardless of where it came from or what it's mentally tagged for. But Richard Thaler, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who essentially built the field of behavioral economics, noticed something that drove him crazy for years. Real people don't do that, at all. Real people sort their money into invisible mental categories, treat those categories as completely separate, and make radically different decisions depending on which category the money belongs to. They keep cash in a jar labeled food, even when they need to borrow money from a friend. They blow an unexpected bonus on a vacation they'd never budget for. They sell winning stocks and hold on to losers, because one account feels in the green and the other doesn't. Thaler called this mental accounting. And as he wrote in his book, Misbehaving, from the moment he coined the term, he couldn't stop seeing it everywhere. Once you learn this concept, neither will you. Just a quick note before we dive in. Everything here is for educational purposes only and not financial advice. This is about understanding how your mind works, not a prescription for what you should specifically do. Let's get into it. Here's a question Thaler actually used in research, and the answer will tell you a lot about yourself. You're on a beach. It's hot. You desperately want a cold beer. A friend offers to go buy one for you from the only place nearby. In one version of the question, that place is a rundown grocery store. In another version, it's a fancy resort hotel. How much would you pay? When Thaler asked this, adjusted for today's prices, people said they'd pay around $4 from the grocery store and over $7 from the resort hotel. Same beer, same beach, same thirst, same cold amber relief. The beer is consumed at the exact same spot. You never even enter the resort or the store. There's no difference in the experience whatsoever. Yet people are willing to pay nearly double, based purely on where the transaction is happening. Why? Thaler identified two distinct types of value that humans get from any purchase. He called them acquisition utility and transaction utility. Acquisition utility is the straightforward part. How much is this thing actually worth to me? If you're parched on a beach, a beer is worth a lot. That's the acquisition side. But humans also experience something extra, transaction utility. That is the feeling you get from the deal itself, separate from the product. It's the pleasure of getting a bargain, or the sting of feeling ripped off. In the beach scenario, paying $7 at a fancy resort hotel feels acceptable, because your reference point for that setting is high prices. You expected to overpay, so you're not bothered. But paying $7 at a rundown bodega? That's an outrage. The reference price for a small store is low. You feel cheated, even though the beer's identical. This is why the same jacket can sell for $120 at a department store and $300 at a boutique with the same exact customers. It's not just the product they're buying, it's the feeling of the transaction, and this has enormous practical implications. Retailers know about transaction utility. It's why sales and discounts are structured the way they are. When you see a price marked down from $200 to $120, the original price isn't just information, it's a reference anchor. It creates transaction utility. It makes you feel like you're winning. Maya Bar Hillel, a friend of Thaler's, went to buy a quilt for her double bed. Quilts were on sale, all sizes, same price. The regular king size had been $150 more than the double. Now they were all equal. She bought the king size. She didn't need a king size quilt for a double bed. She just felt like she was getting more deal, more transaction utility. Her brain turned a routine purchase into a perceived bargain, and she ended up with a quilt hanging 2 feet off every side of her bed. The lesson? Every time you feel the rush of a deal, ask yourself, would I be buying this if the original price tag weren't there? If the answer is no, what you're buying might not be the product. It might be the feeling. When Thaler first started studying how households actually manage their money, he did something unusual for an economist. He sat down with real families and just listened. What he found was that many people, especially those on tighter budgets, managed money almost exactly the way their grandparents did. They used envelopes or mason jars, one for rent, one for groceries, one for utilities, one for entertainment. Each jar was a separate world. Here's the thing that made economists furious. Money is fungible. If your electricity jar is full and your food jar is empty, you can just use the electricity money for food. It will work. It's the same money. But that's not how people think. Thaler and Sunstein tell a story in Nudge that perfectly captures this. Gene Hackman once recounted visiting Dustin Hoffman's apartment back in their early struggling days. Hoffman asks him for a loan. But when Hackman walks into the kitchen, he sees mason jars lined up on the counter, each stuffed with money and labeled. Rent, entertainment, food, multiple jars, multiple labels. He asks, if you have all this cash, why do you need a loan? Hoffman points to one jar, the food jar. It's empty. To a standard economist, this is pure madness. To a behavioral economist, this is humans being exactly human. Now here's where it gets really interesting for your finances. Researchers Justine Hastings and Jesse Shapiro tracked what happened to American consumers when gasoline prices crashed by roughly 50% in 2008, one of the sharpest drops in modern history. According to standard economics, people should have treated that windfall like any other income and spent it on whatever was most valuable to them. Maybe saved it, maybe groceries, maybe paid down debt. What did they actually do? They upgraded to premium gasoline, at 14 times the rate economic models would predict. They had a gasoline mental account. Gas got cheaper. The account had slack. They spent the slack on better gas, even though these same families were cutting back everywhere else, because 2008 was the beginning of a financial crisis. Orange juice stayed the same, milk stayed the same, only the gas got an upgrade. Because the windfall sat in the gas jar, and the gas jar money gets spent on gas. This is the buckets and budgets phenomenon, and it applies to your investing and savings life more than you might realize. Here's the version that can genuinely cost you money. Many households simultaneously maintain a savings account, earning almost nothing in interest, while carrying a credit card balance charging 15 to 20%. An economist would scream, pay off the credit card with the savings. The math is obvious. But people resist, because the savings account belongs to a different mental jar. It's the emergency jar, the future jar. Touching it feels wrong, even when the math says it's the right move. Whether you're 30 years old building a portfolio or 60 years old managing a drawdown strategy in retirement, mental accounting shapes which buckets you treat as touchable and which ones you treat as sacred. Understanding that can help you make decisions based on actual math, not jar labels. You're at a restaurant. The dish arrives and it's genuinely terrible. Wrong flavor, wrong texture, nothing like the menu described. You have two options. Option 1. Stop eating. Push the plate aside. The meal was overpriced and disappointing. But you're done. You pay the bill and move on with your evening. Option 2. Keep eating. Every joyless, unsatisfying bite until the plate is empty. Now here's the question. Does eating the bad meal get your money back? No, the money is gone either way. You paid the moment you ordered. So if you stop eating, you lose the money, but you at least stop the suffering. If you keep eating, you lose the money and you spend 20 more minutes eating something you don't enjoy. One of those is strictly worse than the other, and yet most people keep eating. Why? Because stopping feels like admitting defeat. Leaving food on the plate means the money was wasted. Finishing it feels like getting something back, even when you're getting nothing back at all, except a bad taste in your mouth. This is the sunk cost fallacy. The money already spent is gone, sunk, irrecoverable, finished. It cannot be retrieved by any decision you make from this moment forward. The only rational question is never, what have I already put in? It's always, what is the best choice available to me right now? As Kahneman documents in Thinking Fast and Slow, sunk cost thinking traps people in situations that are making them worse off. Not because they can't see the logic, but because closing a losing account feels like accepting a loss. And your brain is wired to avoid that feeling almost at any cost. And here's where it moves from a bad dinner to something that can genuinely damage your financial life. You bought a stock at $50. It's now sitting at $30. The original thesis was wrong. The fundamentals have shifted. The competitive landscape has changed. Every rational signal says move on. But you hold it. You check it every week. You read articles looking for reasons to feel optimistic. You are still sitting at that table, still eating the bad meal, still waiting for the plate to somehow taste better than it did 10 minutes ago. Meanwhile, a better opportunity is right in front of you. But your capital is frozen in a position you would never start today if you didn't already own it. Research by financial economists Hirsch Sheffrin and Meir Statman documented what they called the disposition effect, a finding that Kahneman later highlighted as one of the clearest examples of mental accounting in investing. Investors have a deep, systematic tendency to sell their winning positions too early and hold their losers far too long. They close the accounts that feel good and refuse to close the ones that feel painful. But the rational move is the exact opposite. Sell the losers. Take the tax benefit, stop the bleeding, redeploy the capital somewhere it can actually work. Let the winners run. The problem isn't intelligence. It's that your brain is still staring at an empty plate, convinced that finishing the meal was worth something. It wasn't. The meal was bad. The stock thesis is broken. The past cost is irrelevant to both. The only question that matters is what you do next. We're about halfway through, and so far you've seen how your brain assigns invisible value to deals, locks money in mental jars, and refuses to close losing accounts. And here's the thing. This is just one layer of the psychology of investing. Mental accounting is the foundation, but it connects to a whole web of cognitive patterns that quietly shape every financial decision you make. Loss aversion, overconfidence, the planning fallacy. We're going to keep going deep on all of it. If that's the kind of content that actually helps you think more clearly about money, hit like and subscribe. It helps other people find this channel, and it means you won't miss a future video when it drops. But we haven't talked yet about what happens when you're winning. That's where the psychology gets stranger, and honestly, a bit riskier. The phenomenon even has a name borrowed from casino floors. Let's get into it. Thaler noticed something at his regular faculty poker games. When players were winning, they took risks they'd never normally take. And when he asked them about it, they'd say something like, I'm just playing with the house's money now. Casino gamblers even have a term for it. If you're up early in the evening, you mentally divide your chips into two pockets. Your own money in one, the winnings in the other. The house money, money that wasn't yours to begin with, feels lighter. It's easier to bet with. It doesn't really count. But of course, it does count. The chips convert to the same dollars at the end of the night. This isn't just a casino phenomenon. It drives financial bubbles. In the 1990s stock boom, individual investors were steadily moving more and more of their retirement contributions into equities. Their reasoning? They'd already made so much in the market that even if it crashed, they'd only be giving back recent gains. But of course, When the market turned, there was no house money cushion. There was just loss. The same dynamic played out in the housing bubble years later. Homeowners who'd been flipping properties in Miami and Las Vegas felt insulated by their paper gains. They were, in their own minds, playing with the house's money, until they weren't. Thaler documented this with a lab experiment. People who had just been told they won $30 were far more willing to take a risky 50-50 coin flip than people starting from zero. The same gamble, completely different behavior, because the mental starting point shifted. The practical version of this shows up in your life whenever you receive a bonus, a tax refund, or an inheritance. Notice that sudden money feels fundamentally different from money you earned week by week. You spend it differently. You risk it differently. You justify purchases you'd never otherwise make. That's not a character flaw, that's mental accounting. The discipline is recognizing it when it happens, and asking whether this windfall money deserves the same care you'd give any other dollar you worked for. Let's bring all of this home. Mental accounting isn't stupid. Thaler is clear about this in Misbehaving, and Thaler and Sunstein reinforce it in Nudge. The system exists for a reason. Budgets work, envelopes work. Dedicated accounts for specific goals genuinely help people stay on track. The problem isn't that your brain runs a mental accounting system. The problem is when that system starts making decisions for you, when the jar label matters more than the math. Here are 3 places it's most likely costing you. First, the deal trap. Next time a price cut makes you feel like you're winning, pause and ask, what am I actually comparing this price to? Is the reference price real? Am I buying this because I need it, or because the transaction feels like a victory? High transaction utility is not the same as a good financial decision. The quilt didn't get smaller just because the price tag was exciting. Second, the wrong bucket mistake. If you are simultaneously holding cash in a low-yield savings account and carrying high-interest debt, your mental accounting is costing you real money every month. Review your financial picture as a whole, not as a collection of separate jars. If you're closer to or in retirement, this is especially relevant when thinking about which accounts to draw from, and in what order. The rules of the jar shouldn't override the rules of tax efficiency or sequencing. Third, the sunk cost trap. Whether it's a bad investment, a failing project, or a gym membership you haven't used in 6 months, the money you already spent is gone. It cannot be recovered by continuing. The only question is, what is the best use of your time and money from this moment forward? Every time you stay in a losing position to avoid closing the account in the red, ask yourself, would I start this position today if I didn't already own it? If the answer is no, you have your answer. Mental accounting is not a bug in your brain. It's a feature. It helps you organize a chaotic financial world into something manageable. But features can be exploited by advertisers, by retailers, by your own emotions, by the thrill of a bargain or the pain of a losing stock. The goal isn't to stop using mental accounts. It's to know when yours are working for you and when they're working against you. Richard Thaler spent decades documenting this, and then admitted at the end of his own chapter on the topic that he still keeps a wine cellar he never values at market price, because thinking about it that way ruins the pleasure. Even the economist who discovered the bias lives inside it. So the real question isn't, can you eliminate mental accounting? The question is, are your mental accounts set up to help you build the life you actually want? That's worth sitting with. If you found this useful and you want to keep building this kind of financial self-awareness, subscribing means you'll be there for the next one. We're going deeper into the psychology of investing, loss aversion, overconfidence, the planning fallacy, the full picture of how your brain handles money and risk. In a future video, we'll be going deep on loss aversion specifically, why the pain of losing money is almost twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same amount, and what that means for the decisions you're probably making right now without realizing it. Drop a comment with what financial blind spot you'd most like to understand better. I genuinely want to know what's on your mind.